with a talk by Laura Summers. She is originally from the US and she lived in Australia and now she lives in Berlin. She works for Explosion AI and she has a really interestingly titled talk for us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for that intro. So the talk title, in case you can't see it, is OK Doomer. OK, and my talk is done. Hi, I'm Laura Summers. It's so nice to be here. I just wanted to start by saying thank you so much to all the organizers for all of the enormous amount of hard work you do. Let's give them a clap, eh? Like, it's been such a great conference. Woo! And also, this is only the second in real life event I've been at since COVID, and it's just such a pleasure to see faces in the world. So I'm really enjoying just talking to people and running into people and finding incredibly weird coincidences. Like we sat down next to someone and they followed my husband Andy on Twitter and they were like, "Are you Andy Kitchen?" It's like incredible. So let's get into it. So I've been told I shouldn't run over. Hi, I'm Laura Summers. I'm going to hit 20 years working in TWEC next year in 2024, so I have been around a little while. I'm now working for Explosion, and I'm working as a design engineer and as the product lead for this new product we're working on, Prodigy Teams. We're very excited about it. Please come chat to us about it. Most of my time in the industry has been as a product designer. So I've been working in this design engineering hybrid type of role. I'm a weirdo. I just like wearing a lot of hats. I'm not saying this is a thing people should want to do. It's just how my career has ended up for reasons. And for the last 10 years or so, I've been working mostly in startups, so small to mid-stage startups. So that's me. I like to hang around with tech people who've been around for even longer than me. So this is a group of women I love, and we have a chat that's been going on for a while called The Unbossables, and it's about as spicy as you can imagine. And these folks have been around in tech since COBOL and since, CTRAN and all the rest of it. And they've seen some proverbial shit go down. So an ongoing theme I have of chats with folks like this is how boringly expected and unimaginative text failure modes are these days. So here we have the sweatshop on the left and the click farm on the right. And yes, I'm saying the one is the modern analog of the other. It's bad ideas, new platform, and apologies to anyone working at Klarna. Or it's the same bullshit and shiny new millennial rebranding. Now, I don't mean everything, of course, but I do mean all the ways that technology is used to harm, control, disempower, and disenfranchise people. And I'll just quickly note that I'm going to share a link to all my slides later, so if you want to read any of the things, I do have a ton of links in here, so don't feel obliged to find the URLs now. I'll share a mega URL at the end. So around 2019, I read a book by Stuart Russell called Human Compatible, and I thought it was, interesting, but a little bit esoteric, maybe a little bit stuffy. And my impression was that it was a fringe concern, this idea of super intelligence, the singularity. I was like, well, cool, but is that really a now problem? A few years later, I noticed the doomer movement starting to gain steam. So this is 2020, 2021. So Nick Bostrom wrote this book, Superintelligence 2014. It really didn't take off until this time. Similarly, he founded this institute at Oxford, which is called the Future of Humanity Institute, back in 2005. But again, it only just started getting visible right around then. Similarly, this guy, Eliezer Yudowsky, who you might have seen on the Lex Fridman videos, he founded this institute called the Singularity Institute, which is kind of as culty as it sounds. And then it was renamed the Machine Intelligence Research Institute. And that was back in 2000, but then just around 2020, 2021, it started really popping off. People started paying attention to them. And if you've been unaware of this movement, I'll try to charitably summarize their main concerns. So the first one is that we could unintentionally build or luck into sentient machine learning models with intelligence that's on par or greater than human intelligence. And the second is that these models would then naturally want to exterminate us at the worst, or enslave or oppress us at the best. And I will say, not all doomers claim that the second is inevitable, but just that there's a chance that it will happen, and it's a big enough chance that we need to prepare for it, man. So in 2022 and 2023, so a few years later, there's been this explosion of press and attention on the movement. Just nonstop doomer stuff happening. And I'll note especially Yoshua Benigo, who's one of the 3 godfathers of deep learning, jumping on the bandwagon fairly recently, and also Geoffrey Hinton, the second of the 3 godfathers of deep learning, jumping on the bandwagon. And, you know, I've been asking myself, well, this has been going since 2000, so what's changed? Why now? And you know, it has to be this explosion in generative models and large language models, right? Like, that's the only thing that makes sense. This step change in the capabilities of AI systems has really had a ripple effect on our collective consciousness. But I really want to ask the question, do these new models actually point a path to the idea of human-type intelligence or superintelligence? So here's Yann LeCun, who's the 3rd godfather of deep learning, saying he holds the opposite position. And I will say, like, I don't agree with him on lots of things, but I'm shockingly right on side with him in this particular issue. So he says that Geoffrey believes that LLMs are smarter than I believe they are, and he's a little more optimistic than I am about how they might get us to human-level AI. Now, my take, if you haven't guessed already, is that no, these things are not scratching at consciousness or human-level intelligence, even if they are much more general. My guess is that even the smartest amongst us, even those who should really know better, are really unable to keep a principled view of large language models. As soon as the interaction feels too real, we start assigning them agency. Or, in other words, as you can see here, we can't stop anthropomorphizing the machine. As a little side note, if you haven't seen Kismet, it's this MIT Media Lab project. It's a babbling robot that does turn-taking, and people will sit and talk to it for hours, having nonsense conversations, and they think it's a character, they think it's a person. And I think this is a great example of like the way that we can't stop assigning agency to the machine, even if there's nothing remotely like that going on. So yeah, I know. I really do. I know there are deep debates about how intelligent GPT really is, and questions about whether sufficiently being able to approximate the shape of meaning is so close as to be indistinguishable from meaning itself. But I can't help feel that focusing too much on that question of a potential future evil, angry intelligence is just a distraction. Like, I love this Andrew Ng quote, worrying about AI, evil superintelligence, is worrying about overpopulation on Mars when we haven't even landed on the planet. And apologies, Elon, but that shit ain't happening anytime soon. So yeah, I mean, I think we're really missing the point. And when this whole topic started in the world, I saw this meme on Twitter and I thought, that's beautiful. It really captures my feeling about the discussion. It's like you're just absolutely focusing on the wrong thing. But I'm going to extend it, okay? So it's not a trolley, it's not an ethics problem, it's not an abstraction, it's a product. And that product is spitting cash out as it goes, rolling over the bodies of the people on the tracks. And to extend the metaphor even one more point, I would say often the guy who used to be at the switch is now sitting in a bookstore somewhere signing his book saying, hey guys, this one time I worried my product might be super intelligent someday. And that same guy is saying maybe we should stop, designing trolleys now. It's like, okay, cool story, bro. I've been having a debate with my boss and colleague and friend, Matt, about this. And he thinks that we should be able to work on X risk, or extinction risk, in a principled way alongside all of the other things we care about, all of the other problems we want to solve in the world. And I'm genuinely sympathetic to this point of view. And I want to say, I'm not here to do Team Edward versus Team Jacob here. I'm here to try and spin up some conversations. But in my view, it's my sense, my intuition that the doomers are actively opposed to these disciplines that we kind of broad church call AI ethics or AI fairness. Like they noticeably don't engage with the scholarship, go to the conferences, talk to the researchers who are doing that work, and there's tons of them, and I'm not even gonna try and name them all because they're wonderful women and wonderful people of color, and yeah, but there's tons of them, and I have heaps of resources in my GitHub if you ever wanna like go check out like how to do AI auditing or data sheets for data sets or model cards for models, like all of those really practical, useful tools that they're exploring. The other thing is, beyond this thing, which is letter writing campaigns and saying, hey, we should stop research, I've really struggled to work out what their actual concrete proposal is. Like, there doesn't seem to be that much actual technique, work, offering happening from the movement. So to me, this is what it feels like. The doomers are bored by boring ethics, and they want to just like go think about the cool new AI apocalypse. And honestly, I kind of get it, right? It's easier to talk about the singularity compared to the slow, uneven collapse of environment and civil society that's already happening. This is like good distraction, good procrastination. And I think the mess of tangled systems and wicked problems is what we really need to talk about. I should hurry up a little. Rather than the robot rapture, the single point of failure, sorry, I'll say something quickly about this quote. I love this framing of the problem because the engineer is calling this X-Rix thing extinction, right? He's saying like they're calling it extinction, it sucks the air out of the room. It means there's no room for other discussion. It's sort of like eating the oxygen, right? So yeah, I think the robot rapture, the single point of failure, the one bomb to kill the whole world, yes, that's an Oppenheimer reference. This is the thing that's like fun to think about, but should really fundamentally just be left to the science fiction writers, and we should get down in the weeds with the interesting problems. And I just want to say to the side, doomers really, really love a metaphysical scenario. Like, I kept seeing images of Dante's hell and, like other hellscape type references, and I'm really struggling to take them seriously as scientists when it feels much more like religion or cult. So I'm gonna leave that there. So without going into the weeds, I'm just gonna point you at a couple resources I really like if you're interested about this question of AGI, what it might actually look like, what engineering principles are missing, what we need to build, what we need to conceive of. I really like this second one, Deep Learning and AGI, still a long way to go. And there's a podcast version of this if you listen to the Data Cynic podcast, or Data Skeptic podcast, which kind of embodies what I like about data science. So it's a great podcast. Yeah, so I would highly recommend having a deep read, and I won't try and like go into like the long form rebuttal of the movement because that's a 2-hour talk, not a 30-minute talk. But yeah, look, I'm going to say this. Let's just assume that we grant all the doomer premises. Let's say, okay, everything is true, buddy. Exactly, I agree with you. It's coming for us. The robots are going to murder us. They're going to like kick us out of our homes, whatever. How do we prep for the AI apocalypse? Well, my pitch is it's exactly the same stuff we should be doing, even if it didn't happen. So I think we're missing all of this engineering fundamentals basics that we just really should be including already, and we're not. So this is software engineering fundamentals that we should just bake into our roadmaps to help make our software more robust, our models more interpretable, and our systems more resilient. The second half of this talk is a checklist of practical, cheap, and easy things you can do to improve your models in production or your automation in its context. You do have to use your common sense to identify which of these proposals is cheap and easy for you, given your stack, given your frameworks, given your tooling. So I'm going to say, I can't assume that every single one of these will be cheap and easy given what's going on with your system, but I'm sure you can find at least a few that are cheap or easy, and probably a couple more that might be quite approachable and reachable without too much effort, with a little bit of careful engineering. My particular interest is the seam between your technology and the outside world. The interface between machines and humans, not just UI, but all touch points. And not just customers, but all people, all humans impacted by the system. If you think that implementing these features is not a you job, I really want to disagree with you. It's my view that data science and machine learning expertise is really, really important, really imperative to the correct implementation of all of these features. And importantly, it's so crucial for the correct interpretation of the signal that the features produce. So please don't think, oh, right, I can tune out for the second half of this. This is not a me job. I really think everyone in here has something very important to offer to the implementation and doing work of all of these kinds of tools. So the first one I'd like to offer is a baseline. I'm hoping this isn't really that surprising a story or surprising a concept, but just quickly to say this baseline as in a simpler version of a model, a simpler version of your automation, your algorithm, your tool. So having a conceptual smaller map to go next to your bigger map so that you have something to compare it to. I really love this story. My lovely husband, Andy, told me this. He went to this hackathon, a data science hackathon with a friend, and they were all trying to write an algorithm to predict the weather. So they were trying to come up with a weather predictor that could highly accurately predict tomorrow's weather. And a whole bunch of teams went away and they did all these cool features and feature engineering, and they did all of this crazy work, and someone went and did a multimodal approach, and people did very cool, very big things. But the one that won was this. It's an average. It is literally an average. And the average is today's temperature plus the temperature from tomorrow's date last year divided by 2. And it wins on accuracy, interpretability, ease of implementation, everything you can imagine. And it's also just elegant, right? And I think that we often forget that things like this exist in the world and that we can look for them and that we don't have to go to the most uninterpretable model as the first step. So when I say baseline, I really mean in a broad sense. So this could be, as we saw, a simple calculation or just basic computer logic. You could have some business rules that need to be encoded. I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but maybe there's something interesting in that macro that your colleague wrote 20 years ago in an Excel spreadsheet, right? There's often gold in there. There's interesting opinions and ideas about the problem space, encoded in logic. And just because it's not Python doesn't mean we get to poo-poo it. You could also think of just a simpler model, right? So it could be a linear regression. And if you're using an API, and I know lots of folks are building on top of the OpenAI paid APIs now, you can use a different version of the model or look for an open source alternative or try just another paid API, but basically just try the same thing somewhere else, right? Just make sure you have something to compare it to so the one precious baby you brought into the world doesn't have a sibling to compare it to, right? You want to know if it's actually thriving and doing well. The second pitch I'd like to offer is this idea of a kill switch. Now, I have to make more jokes, and I do have to say, I'm pretty sure the designers of the Terminator were pretty mad at themselves that they didn't bake in a kill switch, because that would have gotten rid of that whole epic saga of stories. But even seriously, there's this very interesting and honestly I find kind of entertaining DevOps cautionary tale called Nightmare, a DevOps cautionary tale. And it's essentially, Knight Capital was a algorithmic trading platform, and they managed to miraculously wipe $400 million in assets in 45 minutes. And I find that honestly an impressive feat. I don't know how the hell you managed to do that. It's kind of, again, mind-blowing. But the thing, I highly recommend reading the article if you're interested in me, if you're interested, like me, in things tangled systems and how things fall down and where the checks and balances didn't work. But even if you're not interested in that, just the top-level story is if they had had a kill switch implemented, they could have pressed it on minute 1 and saved all of that money. So honestly, kill switches save, I won't say lives, but they certainly save assets. That's awkward. But yeah, what can that look like? I mean, it can be as simple as having a maintenance road, right? You don't have to keep everything live. If you just have a maintenance mode page that you can switch over to with your app in production, so if the model goes off the rails, if you see it drifting, if you see some weird predictions coming out of it, you just have something that you can turn on so that people know that your app or your website is still live. Quite simple. Now, if you had that baseline that we talked about in the first point, you could also imagine being able to roll back to it. So this is a nice way of thinking, well, hey, we had the cool model running, but actually we don't want to take our whole system offline. So if we can have like some if logic that reverts to that, then we have a way of building more resilience, more robustness into the system. You can also imagine doing system rollback, but I will say this is hard mode because it's been my experience, and I don't want to be snarky, and if this is not true of you, don't see it as an attack, but it has been my experience that most folks don't have version control running on their model or their training data, let alone their model and their training data. And I think you need both if what you want is to be able to do system rollback, because you have to know the state of your model and the state of the data to know that's a safe place in time to go back to. But if you are doing that and you're doing release management or some combination of those two things and you feel confident you know the state of your system going backwards in time, you can do this thing, the system rollback, and you can just push it to a previously working state while you go and feverishly work out what the problem is, and then you can push your patch and everything is good. The third thing I want to talk about is exposing the machine. And by this, I mean popping the hood, like drawing back the curtain, letting folks see what's going on. The simplest thing to do here is just label it. Say, hi, I'm a robot, not a person. Job is done. Takes 2 minutes. I think most folks have a hard time sort of imagining how this works in their system because it feels like you're taking away the marketing magic. But honestly, people already think that things are robots even when they're people. It's just better to say it. The next thing you can do is imagine things like exposing machine confidence. Like, you might need to do some thinking about what accuracy scores you're using. Is it precision or recall? Are you using F1 score? Like, what tools you're using to try and assess the quality of your model. But once you work that out, you can certainly come up with a human interpretable way to expose that to people on the other side of the system. And here you can see we've got a little puppy that's been miscalculated as a kitten. And we've got the added bonus of letting the user tell the system that doesn't seem right. And that's another thing I think we should be doing, and I get to that in feedback loops. Another thing you can do here is phone a human friend. So you might say, like, 99% of the time our confidence levels are high enough, and we feel like we can give a pretty good answer. But that last 1% of the time, maybe we just shouldn't attempt to. Maybe we just think our confidence is not high enough and we're not going to provide a good quality prediction, classification, etc. So instead of attempting to do that and giving a bad result into the world, we can just say, hey, we're not sure. We need to have human review this particular record. Or depending on your system, you could imagine offering 2 options to the world and saying, we think it might be A or B, but we're not sure. What do you think it is? And again, that turns into training data, and you help make your model better in real time. You also, if possible, really want to try and explain your machine decisions. So by this, I mean anything you know about the features that go into the decision outcome, anything that helps users understand why they're getting what they're getting and if they agree to it. The 5th thing I want to talk about is having a paper trail. So this is basically just knowing what happened, when it happened, and what the state of the world was when it happened. So to make that real, we want a decision record which knows what system version we were on. We were talking before about doing system release management and having some control, some version control happening on both the code of our model and the state of our data sets. This is the thing that we need it for, so that we can detect back in time what was happening and work out why that decision happened and if it was wrong. You also want to make sure you have a decision ID or a transaction ID for that record plus that state of the world and that moment in time, right? Most folks go through a machine learning decision process, get to the end, and then suddenly that moment is lost in time and they have no record to be like, oh, well, this happened to me and here's my receipt. Here's the thing, go investigate it for me. So yeah, think about what does that UUID look like? Where do you put it? How do you store it? How is it used to be reinterpreting the system if someone needs to take a look at it? You can also think about improving your logs, your audit trail. And again, this is very boring, eat your vegetables stuff, but logging really matters. Again, that's a whole talk, but please make sure that your logs are interpretable, that you can look at them and understand what they're trying to tell you. I also just want to wave quickly at this idea of decision recourse. This is a thing that is, again, its own topic. It's being able to interrogate a system as a user and say, I don't think that's right. Can you please do it again? Give me, can someone review my decision? Can someone tell me if it's correct? I don't think I can remotely try to cover it right now, but I will just say that if these things are not in place, you don't have a hope of doing this thing. So just make sure that you get the fundamentals in place to be able to keep going. And the last thing I want to talk about is, oh, no, I have two more things. Oh, no, this is the last thing. Limiting blast radius. So this is doing your model in production with fewer people to start with. That's the point. Start with fewer people and move on from there. So this means having a trial run, a beta phase, and making sure that you work out who's the right early adopter, selecting that group, communicating with them intensively, and assuming that your system will fail. When you're ready to do your first production run, again, you can do it as a phased rollout. You don't have to turn on the floodgates for everybody. You can pick 100 people at a time. It's much easier to have a failure mode at 100 than it is at 1,000 or 10,000, et cetera. Again, same exact points. You can also use feature flags. So once your model is in production, you can say, well, hey, I want to hide this for 90% of my users, but try it out on a few folks first and see what happens. And the last thing, I really am nearly finished, I'm sorry, is feedback loops. We want to consider all the users of our system. I'm just going to get to the end of this so we can, sorry. So this is customers, people who pay for it. This is operators, people who administer, developers, anybody who's using the system to try and get it to output what it outputs. This is also people who do the training data. This is labelers. This is annotators. This is the people who the system makes decisions or predictions about. And it's end users, so it's people who use native or web apps. I suggest that you front load your feedback efforts because it's easier to talk to 10 people than 100 or 1,000. And I also suggest, I'm just going to go to the end again, that you really try to talk to them directly, especially early on. Create a Slack, throw them into it, have a shared Discord, whatever you like, but just let people reach out to you in real time. And then as the system matures, start baking those feedback loops into the UI, into the interface. But you don't have to do that at first. You just need a couple of folks who know that you're there to listen, and your job is done. Okay. All right, I'm going to just go past this because I'm at time. And there is a cheat sheet, which will be in my links. So if you want to be reminded of all of these big points that we talked about, please go get it. And if you get this is a QR code I created with Hugging Face, like a transformer to do cool QR code art. If you scan this, you get the slides which follow, which is all the links. So yeah, I'll leave that up. Thank you so much for your attention. Sorry for running short. Really appreciate it.